A Dodge Coronet? A PhD in Lunchroom Manners? I bet it's honorary.
Just before lunch one day, a puppet show was put on at school.
Oh, I get it. They use
Mr.
creepy
Bungle
puppets to
Goes
scare
to
kids
Lunch.
into using good manners.
It was fun to watch. In the puppet show, Mr. Bungle
Just
came
got
to the
back from the
boys' room
jungle.
on his way to lunch. He looked at his hands. His hands were dirty,
He had just killed someone,
And
so
his
he was a
hair
bit
was messy.
disheveled.
but Mr. Bungle didn't stop to wash his hands or comb his hair.
He was a
He
filthy
went
little
right
man.
to lunch.
Did we mention he was also a cannibal?
Then, instead of getting into line at the lunchroom, Mr. Bungle pushed everyone aside and went right to the front.
Mr. Bungles is a jerk.
Even though this made the children laugh, no one thought that was a fair thing to do. Then, in the lunchroom, Mr. Bungle was so clumsy and impolite that he knocked over everything, and no one wanted to sit next to him.
I did not see that coming.
And when
What
he
a
finally
twist.
knocked his
Did M.
own
Night
tray off
Shyamalan
the
direct
table,
this?
that was the end of the puppet show. The children knew that even though Mr. Bungle was funny to watch, he wouldn't be much fun to eat with. Phil knew that a Mr. Bungle wouldn't have many friends.
And Phil was a
He
brown-noser.
wouldn't want to be like Mr. Bungle. Later, Miss Brown said it was time for the children who ate in the cafeteria to go to lunch.
Wait a minute, why didn't all the
She hoped
children
there
eat in
weren't
the
any
lunchroom?
Mr. Bungles in this room. Phil stopped to return a book to Miss Brown while his friends went on to the lunchroom.
He had a
He
thing
would
for
have to
Miss
catch up with them
Brown.
later. On his way to catch up with his friends, Phil almost walked past the boys' room, but he
Almost
stopped
walk
and
right
thought,
past it by
"Were
walking
his
right up to
hands
the door?
clean?" No, they were a little dirty.
Out, damn
Phil
spot!
remembered that Mr. Bungle didn't wash his hands. Mr. Bungle's hair was messy, too. Phil didn't
Gotta
want to
look
be
good for
like
the
Mr.
ladies.
Bungle. Inside the boys' room, Phil was surprised to see some
Broadway
of his
production
friends
of
washing
Hamilton.
their hands, too. Phil washed his hands well, with lots of soap.
Okay. Whoa. Okay. Hey, does this kid not know we're in a soap shortage right now?
Then he rinsed the soap off.
That was not 30 seconds.
Phil dried his hands well, too. When he was finished, he threw the paper towel in the basket where it belonged. And then he made sure that his hair looked neat.
What hair?
Now, Phil and his friends were ready for lunch.
Is it just me, or does this school look like it's in Nazi Germany?
There was a line of children waiting to get into the lunchroom when Phil got there. He saw some boys he knew at the front of the line. They waved for him to go up to the front with them. But Phil didn't want to break into line. as
Not
Mr.
today,
Bungle
Timmy.
did.
Not today.
So Phil went to the end. That was the fair thing to do. He would see his other friends inside the lunchroom. The line moved very fast. And
You don't
soon
stop
Phil
to look
was
around
inside.
once in a while. You could miss
First
it.
he picked up his tray. Then he got his silverware.
Start
He
from
put
the
his knife,
outside
fork,
and work
spoon
in.
neatly on the tray.
Hey, where's my
Then
salad
he slid his
fork?
tray along.
Sweet rail slide, man.
He always enjoyed looking at the good food in the cafeteria.
But he
It
was
tasted
on a
good,
diet, so
and
he
was good
never
for him,
partook.
too. Instead of having a sandwich today, Phil decided to take the hot lunch.
With extra Tabasco sauce.
Phil took some bread and butter, too. And he knew what else he wanted, milk. But Alice took the last carton on the tray.
That hussy
Maybe
Alice.
there was more milk. So he said, "May I please have some milk?" Phil
Grubby
remembered
little
to say,
monster, I
"May
have to do everything
and
for them."
please." That was very polite.
But what wasn't polite
Yes, there
was the
was
way he
more milk.
complimented the lunch lady's mustache.
Phil remembered to say thank you when he took the carton of milk. Phil had good manners. He didn't want to be like Mr. Bungle in the lunchroom. Phil didn't want to forget his dessert. The cake looked delicious.
It was actually brown styrofoam.
At the end of the line, the lunchroom supervisor said she had noticed how polite Phil was, and she smiled at him.
She was creepy
She
like
wouldn't
that.
smile at a Mr. Bungle. Phil went to the table where his friends were. He put his tray down carefully, pulled out his chair quietly, and sat down.
And then
knew
he
his
thanked the
friends
Dark
wouldn't
Lord
like
for
a
this
noisy
bounty.
Mr. Bungle at their table. There was someone Phil liked, Freddie.
Ladies and gentlemen,
He always
the
brought
earliest
his lunch
known
from
footage
home.
of Mr.
It
Kruger.
looked good. Freddie had a sandwich, an apple, a
Apples are
cookie,
rubbish.
and milk. Before Phil began to eat, he always put a napkin on his lap. So did Freddie. Everyone liked Freddie. He was very polite.
If Freddie jumped off
For
a bridge, would you do
example,
that
if he
too?
had food in his mouth when someone talked to him, he always took time to chew the food with his mouth closed and swallow before he answered. Phil noticed how straight and tall Freddie usually sat. Freddie kept his feet on the floor, too.
They had been nailed there.
Phil would rather be like Freddie than like Mr. Bungle.
But deep down inside,
Another
he
polite
wanted to be
person
like
everyone liked was
Liberace.
Alice. For example, when Alice sneezed,
She
covered
snarted,
her mouth
you
and
know,
nose.
a sneeze and a fart
This
combo.
protected her friends at the table from any germs. While Phil and his friends ate, a boy ran past their table.
Screaming,
You
the
shouldn't
end is
run in the
nigh!
lunchroom. Only Mr. Bungle would do that. Phil and his friends wouldn't like to have a Mr. Bungle at their table. Then lunchtime wouldn't be as much fun as it is. Phil ate slowly,
Making
and
sure to say
enjoyed
the
his
entire
lunch.
alphabet before swallowing.
Finally, he had eaten everything except his dessert. He saved his cake for last. Only a Mr. Bungle would eat his dessert before he'd finished the rest of his lunch.
Well, call me
And
Mr.
Phil
Bungle
wasn't
then.
Mr. Bungle. The cake was good. Phil drank his milk carefully. Some children are messy when they drink milk.
How they
Not
get it in
Phil.
their hair is beyond me.
As each of Phil's friends finished, they didn't leave the table, but waited for all the others to finish eating too. Phil was the last one done.
And that's why
He
the other
wiped his
kids
mouth
resented
and hands
him.
carefully with his napkin. Then he cleaned the table where he sat. He didn't want to leave his place at the table dirty. Everyone at the table cleaned his own place well.
His? Is
But
Alice a
look at that
boy?
table.
Ah, young Alice
It was
Cooper,
left
ladies and
very
gentlemen.
Messy. Phil thought a Mr. Bungle must have sat there. But Phil didn't want to be like Mr. Bungle, so he put his chair neatly into place. And his table looked fine.
Ooh, you looking fine?
Not a piece of paper or scrap of food was left on it. No Mr. Bungle sat here. Phil's friends were careful to put their waste papers and empty milk cartons where they belonged.
They saved the milk
In
cartons
this
to
way,
refill
they
later
helped keep
with
the
glue
lunchroom
water.
clean. Phil was certain that Mr. Bungle wouldn't put his paper in the waste basket and his empty carton on the milk tray. Mr. Bungle probably wouldn't bother to put his lunch tray in the right place either. But
Mr.
Phil
Bungle
and his
probably hates
friends
America,
did.
too.
Lunch was good today.
Unlike usual.
And then Miss Brown told Phil and his friends how proud she was of them. They had left their table the neatest in the lunchroom.
And there was
No one
great
here
rejoicing.
was a Mr. Bungle, and no one wanted to be. Are you like Mr. Bungle? Mr. Bungle is a shame because he
Shame,
spoils lunch.
shame, shame, shame,
Don't be like Mr.
shame.
Bungle. Have good lunchtime manners, and lunch will be more fun for everyone.
Please join us for our next adventure, Mr. Bungle Goes to Washington.